Hi. At the very beginning, I would like to say you something about the scale. So the Center for Information Technology is a part of Ministry of Interior that creates a nationwide ID project. So it's a very large-scale project. Around 38 million people is using that. So we have a real problem with scaling. That's first thing. And the another thing, we have to be government comply or government ready. So we have these constraints that bound us and try to force us to do it more conventional way, the more conservative way than we try to. So I have been asked whether it's possible to bring the agile goodies to the very strict environment of the government projects. And it is possible. It's hard, but it is possible. You cannot do sprints and estimation from the day one because people are very focused on the old ways. You cannot discard the old documentation you have just because the second line of Agile Manifesto states that we prefer working software over comprehensive documentation. So the best thing is to start learning how to improve, how to create, how to take those best parts of Agile Manifesto and improve how the process, how the software development is done with this system. So the previous system we have created, it was like in the middle 80s, something like that, around 30 years ago. It was very old system built from the technology that even do not exist right now. So there was a binary database written by some guys who is already deceased, I suppose, or something like that. But we have to create an enterprise-ready system for nationwide, a state-of-the-art 21st century system that is capable and able to handle the whole 21st century type of user experience with the internet, with the computer systems. So we started from creating a very friendly environment, and I will bring you for few quick slides just to show you that we are not guys with the suits and ties and so on. So we have exactly the same. Our company looks like exactly the same like the startups. So you have young guys, you have managers, those two guys who is eating pizza with the other guys. Just normally, basically, the same company, the same type of the company that has been around for many of years. So it doesn't just makes any different from the startups, from the... Oh, by the way, this is my place where I work today. Okay. That's enough for the beginning. So what have we got? So we've started from understanding the whole concept behind the Agile Manifesto. Here's the guy, one of the original authors of the Agile Manifesto, and I was talking to him, and he told me 1 year ago around that the most important part is this one: people in interactions over processes and tools. So we've been focusing on how to bring those good development practices and cooperation and the type of collaboration between people, and not to push too much on the methodology, on the practices, on the whole process. So we started from cleaning up our backlog, on creating our backlog. I will show you how the documentation looks like in a couple of slides. But we started from cleaning up processes. So we brought Scrum as our new feature and improvements process. Then we tried to Kanban for maintenance and bug fixing. Why we have chosen those hybrid approach? Because Scrum and Kanban is greatly influenced on each other and could be used in very, very good way in order to have more performance and more productive development throughout your whole process. So we've changed the business analytics into product owners. And this is very first thing you can do, pretty almost. But this is not about the naming. The naming is just only the one side. So we started to treat those business analytics, who has a very domain who has a very domain knowledge, we started to treat them as a product owners. They create a backlog, they decompose the issues, they split them into the smaller ones, they prioritize them, they change the whole way how to create this enterprise-grade software. So basically, at the very beginning, when we started the transformation, I was given the task to how to connect this Prince-related methodology that was used previously and how to transfer that into the Agile world. So from the perspective of high management, we are still doing a Prince methodology project. However, we started to develop this with the Agile spirit. So we started to transform our development and then trying to make an effort, make a connection to the whole methodology on top of it, which was at the very beginning, which was the Prince. So we started from decomposing the backlog. So this was the original documentation for the system. The whole, the product owners or business analytics take the problem, split it into the books or very thick papers, and just from the scratch, we have to create a backlog, decompose and do it in the Agile manner. So page by page, use case by use case, we try to do it a right way. So we split those things, we create a backlog, we use some issue tracker, it doesn't matter what's the name of it, because you have to take on the process, and the tools are only that thing that helps you understand, helps you prioritize, helps you organize the system. So then we introduce the dailies. This is, by the way, this is the real pictures from the company. And by the way, this is a government unit. And we've introduced the dailies. But the dailies is not only about the reporting, everyday reporting that I've done such or such, or I've done this thing or this thing. So we try to incorporate dailies as an informational meeting for the developers in order to share the problems they have with the code, with the problems with the understanding of the technical issues with the task or something like that. So we decided not to include product owners in the first daily meetings. And it helps a lot because people were not about reporting. So it doesn't feels like daily confessions when you have to say whatever you've done or you are going to do, but people were focusing on problems. So I have a problem with this or this. And the other developers would like to jump in and help out how to share experience that he have previously encountered and how to help him out with the issue. Then we have created the Scrum and Kanban boards. At first, we use these traditional stickers and so on, and it looks like that. A normal, plain, simple thing. You didn't expect this from government unit, but it was a real. Then we moved to some issue tracker, because issue tracker, the computer system, gives you more flexibility, gives you more possibility to adjust, to shift around, shuffle around the issues, to make more information for the developers who took on the task. So whenever the developer take one of those cards, and in the issue tracker, he assign an issue to him. He has all the information from the documentation, because the documentation was a very good knowledge base. He has in one place. So the developer do not have to rely, do not have to adjust do not have to take this documentation to hand, because he has everything in one place. So then we brought 1 week iteration, and that was very oblivion to us, that because people, like, whenever you try to incorporate Scrum practices or Agile practices, and it states that the sprints could be 4 weeks or less. So we tried with 1 week sprints. And it was very good because people tend to be more dynamic. The changes tend to be more dynamic, and we start to like plan on the Monday. Then we have a daily meeting right here. Something in the middle of the week we have a refinement process. Then we have review and retrospective. That's true for some teams because we do not put any constraints how you can do. So some teams are making all of the meetings on the Monday. Some teams are like doing everything in Wednesday. It doesn't matter. What's the matter is that all of those teams have 1 week iteration. After 1 whole week, we expect to integrate our process, integrate our code, integrate our tasks, and have this feedback loop closed and receive the information whether the process has been, whether the features has been successfully applied to the project. And over, for a week, for 2 years, we have received the information that our code integrates well, our code fits perfectly, we have constantly moving towards the completion of the backlog. So we tried to scale this because we started from 4 teams, I suppose, and then we tried to scale this because you have to have this, maybe not the control, but at least the point of synchronization. So we started to incorporating by creating a scrums of scrums. It was just the first approach to this problem, and so we've created a product owner of the whole teams. And Scrum Master, who is, by the way, trying to make this process working. And those green dots was a product owners of the other teams. So product owners will meet once a week. They will try to incorporate the changes, synchronize them with the people. And then we tried to move. That was the first approach. I will come back to this a little bit later. So we struck the wall. So every time when I started working with a company which is more conservative, old tradition companies, old tradition corporations, I always see that kind of picture. So you have projects, we all have a project, but there you have lines, like business line, quality assurance, development, user experience, infrastructure, whatever. You have always have these lines. And the first thing was to create a project teams. So we talked with the business guys and quality assurance. It was kind of easy because they were very open to working together. So we started with one team who was Team 0 or Team Alpha, whatever, and he was trying to incorporate those changes, go for a project structure. From one team, we have take a business, quality assurance, and developers, and we asked them to work together, and it works. Then we a little bit moved forward to incorporate the other people and to join that movement, and we started to having project teams. Then we moved to UX, and we started to have these lines and people and trying to create a multifunctional teams, so cross-competence teams. But there's always an infrastructure. Infrastructure tends to be a little bit more conservative. I will get to this point a little bit later. So we built a development tools ecosystem. This is where it starts a bit more technical because this is only the tools we used, but the most important part is every change in the system was constantly tested and integrated into the whole branch mainline. So every time when you have a user stories, epics, user stories, technical task, it's one-to-one exactly reflects on how your developer stores features in branches in the Git repository. I will show you some pictures in a minute. Okay, so we introduced the Git flow. I was asked only just briefly talk about that because this is a kind of more technical part. So we have created a master branch and develop branch, and then whenever a developer wants to merge a feature, he just creates a branch and merges to the feature. How it's reflected on a backlog? Simply, every feature is one story from your backlog. So whenever you have stories, and we were tending towards the very small grain stories, like 2 days at most. So every time when you have small stories, you have small feature branches. When you have small feature branches, it easily integrates with the development branch. It's very easy way to have constantly focusing on delivering your stuff, and whenever you frequently integrate, you have less problems with integration. If you have less problem with integration, you're starting to take more time, you're starting to gain more time in order not to fight with the problems that only focusing on the code integration. So then, the releases is very simple. It's just creating a release branch and merging it with the master. And the same goes with the bug fixes, hot fixes on the production server. It doesn't matter. It's just one branch who merges with master or develop branch. So whenever a developer wants to merge his feature, he has to go for pull request process. Pull request is just a simple. We have Stash, Atlassian Stash. Right now it's called Bitbucket Server. It's a very recent change, the rename. So we have one website. There's deleted lines, added lines, and comments. The programmers could comment on that. The continuous integration server, which we use is Jenkins, gives you a highlight on how the code is automatically tested. So PMD, this is a static code analyze processor, gives no problems. Check style, find bugs, build, integration, regression test is in progress, integration test fails. And then when all of those tests give a positive result, we ask at least two people in order to verify the code, and whenever they agree that the change is okay, we can merge the feature. So why we have chosen those paths? In order to have completely different type of tests on each of those branches, and we have like long-lasting static code analyze, so we can track how those big releases influence on the code quality, technical depth, and so on, and very frequent for each feature that merges with developed branch. So each feature, how in very frequent changes, how it's influenced on the code quality. We are using the naming conventions like this, just few words added to standard name of the branch or commit message, and we received a very powerful tool for change management. So we had an audit right before the Christmas, and auditor was asking me about the changes in the source code, and I was able to provide the information from the very high level of the projects. So, for example, from initiatives or epics level, down to stories, technical task, and technical task was exactly related to commits. So I was able to prove every single line of our code, who was responsible for, who was the original author, who was the business person who was involved in the creating a feature, how the feature was described, what was the UML diagrams or flowcharts, or what was the process in our issue tracker. And we were able to connect those dots from very high level standpoint towards the very deep level of the source code and back again. So I was able to prove every line of our code, who was the responsible for and what was the reason why it was brought to life. So then we go for the process like continuous integration and continuous delivery. Whenever you want to integrate your the change sets, whenever you want to integrate your code, just to test it and just frequently as is possible to have this code integrated. It gives you a better possibility to see the changes, and the most important part is the people are creating new features based on the most recent changes in the master or develop branch. This gives you a lot less problems with the integration. So then we have to, because we are a government unit, we are talking about the government projects, we have to bring this change management. But it was very low cost. We had this very well-documented code because every line was connected with some issues in the Jira. So we could create a documentation from our backlog. So very well-written stories with comprehensive description, with diagrams, with comments, with the information from product owner, with responsibilities, with people who are standing and discussing the feature, how it's supposed to look like, and so on. And we could generate the documentation from it. We were not forced to create a very large book, like I told you on the one of the first slides, this very thick book, how to use the system, but we could generate from the issue tracker. And the second line of the Agile Manifesto, that we prefer working software over comprehensive documentation, right now it's been very easy to implement for us because we are focusing on working software just with the very little overhead of writing very well written user stories, and the documentation writes itself. Okay, then we go for the automation. You have to go for the automation when you have a large-scale project, and we are talking about hundreds of thousands of Java code line and even more in other languages. Then we incorporated this into a very hard system of Jenkins, which was constantly building every commit, every pull request, every change set, every change in our repository. Then we go for automation, for test automation like Selenium, for front-end testing, JUnit for the unit testing, SonarQube for displaying the static code analyze artifacts, and JMeter for performance testing, and Archillion for integration testing. We have to build an ecosystem for internal and external use. So basically, we had a problem because the system that I was referring to, the national ID system, is not the only thing we are creating right now. We are creating also a so-called joint operation program for the Polish nationwide information system about the services that the Polish government provides to the people. So with this joint operation program, we had to cooperate with 13, I suppose 13 was the exact number of other ministries. So it was a lot of people, and we have to create two ecosystems. One for internal use, only for our company, only for creating software for our use, and the another one just for collaborating within the other organizations. And that was the thing that struck me most. So we started to train those people how to work in 1 week iterations. So we had a meeting once over the week. We started to thinking about what has to be done. We had a product backlog. We had a very exact and precise agenda for every meeting we have. We are retrospectives. We have a retrospectives once a week, and we are doing it on a very large scale because we have 13 ministries and around several hundred people who is very deeply involved in the process. We created a Confluence data knowledge base, and those people were collaborating on-site without sending any Word documents, without sending any emails. They were just collaborating, working together on one product, on very different aspects of one product. And it strikes me that this is a thing, the first line of Agile Manifesto. Those people are interacting with each other. They're using the processes and tools because it supports how they trying to work. However, the most important part, they started to learn how to collaborate, and that was the way how the agile process was improved and how it was introduced to the Polish government. And then we created a knowledge base, as I mentioned, and then we tried to go for evolutionary design. That was a very unconscious decision Because there's in extreme programming, there's a practice, it's called Evolutionary Design. You start with the barely scratch of your whole system, and then you try over the iteration and iteration, you create the architecture of your system. The architectures of your system just pops up from the code and the system itself. And that was very unconscious, because when we started the system, we have just barely information how the system would look like. And every iteration into the project, the big picture pops up, and then we got. And I had a meeting with one of the most important Agile coaches in Poland, and he told me, Matt, you've been working for 2 years with the Center of Information Technology, and what do you do? What have you done? And I said to him, you know, after a deep thought, I have to tell you that we've gone only for the first line of Agile Manifesto. So I'm working for 2 years right now, and I can summarize that I'm working only on people and interactions, or the processes and tools. The other part, the other stuff is very important, but I haven't gone there yet. So after 2 years, I realized that the most important and the most hard part of this whole thing was just to convince people that this is a good thing. Because most of the people, I showed the pictures of the young people, and they were very open to these agile practices because they have RSS links, they read on the web that agile is a big thing and you have to go agile whenever you deliver the system, whenever you want to deliver a system, and this is the way how the systems are done right now in the 21st century. But we had also these older guys, the more conservative, that spent a lot of years writing legacy systems in waterfall practices, and you have to take another approach. How to change their mindset to go for agile, to go for the agile practices, to go with the agile spirit. I suppose that's the most important part. So. What we are doing right now, so right now we are working on sprint goals. So we want to synchronize our team efforts, so every team has to have at least one sprint goal in order to have effective daily. We're not focusing on what you have done in your previous day and what you are going to do tomorrow, but we are going to shift the mindset of the people who are participating in daily towards how much value you brought towards the sprint goal. How is the process? And then we want to synchronize those sprint goals. Every card here is reflecting on a sprint goal of one team, 1 week. So you have a portfolio right here. Every color of the cards is reflecting on the different segment of the system. And every card is one sprint goal of one team. There's 9 different colors, 9 different parts of the system. Every card is reflecting that, and you have different pinpoints. So every pin is reflecting on the risk of not delivering this issue in the sprint. So whenever the issue is, for example, in the first sprint, and you have red, green, and yellow pin. So red. Probably we won't deliver this feature in this. We won't deliver the sprint goal in this sprint. The yellow is probably we won't deliver. Green, everything seems to be okay, and we would like to deliver. There's some cards that reflects collaboration. So these 2 teams are collaborating with each other in order to deliver. And this high perspective that gives us the information not only about one product, but it gives us information about the whole perspective of the system. The swim lines here, like this is the first one, this is the second one, and this is the third one, reflects on the months. So we have 3 months plan on the board right now. The teams are asked to plan their work for at least 3 more sprints in front. So we have at least very well planned 1 month, in front. So we have another board with quarters, and we have 4 lines, and we have planned for a high-level plan for the next year. Then we go towards the code quality, and we brought something that's called quality evangelist, so the people who is responsible for delivering the spirit of taking care about the quality of your code. So those people take care about the different components of the system. This is a real picture from the Sonar Cube. And those people engage with the community. And we try to start convince people to take a part in community meetings. So this is a real picture from Warsaw Java user group. Here's my friend from Allegro, and he was giving a talk on microservices. And on this room, there's at least 9 people from Center of Information Technology. So we tried to incorporate the best practices, the best how the normal, typical companies work, and we tried to just to make those people think in exactly the same way how their colleagues in very commercial application work, and try to incorporate those kind of thinking on the very normal level of creating, thinking about the software development. So we have to create processes, and this is what we are working right now. I mentioned that we created some processes, but we need to evolve them in order to be more compliant, in order to be more strict with our rules. So trust is not not control-based organization. This is what I have to work on very strictly right now, because you know, every time when you have a very hierarchical structure, so there's the director, there's a middle management and team leader and so on, you have to create a trust. And Henrik Knieberg, one of the agile coaches behind the Spotify transition, told Agile at scale requires trust at scale. And this is how we have to think about the company, about any software system. So this is the most difficult part, because you have to ask the managers to trust your developers, to trust that whenever they want to experiment, whenever they want to change shift or bring, for example, refactoring on the very large scale, the strategic refactoring, like it was mentioned in the previous talk, you have to trust that developers have a very goodwill, and they will deliver the system. And you have to create an environment for secure experiments. So you let them experiment, and do not take, whenever there is a failure, experiments has two different outcomes. It could be success or failure. And whenever there's a failure, you have to take a step back and wonder for a while just why there was a problem with this, not complain about the outcomes and so on. So maybe this approach wasn't very good, but you have to change. You have to pivot for once in a while and find your way towards the software development. So we go with the Scrum and Kanban. Using a Scrum and Kanban, connecting those two dots are very, very good and efficient thing. We started to open source our code. So this is a GitHub repository, and we changed how the Polish government is thinking about the source code. Center for Information Technology was one of the first government unit in Poland that open sourced its code. So this is kind of what trying to revolutionize. The next step will be the open data. That's very far future right now because of the complex systems, not the complex system, but the character of the data. So we have information about the people, but we can share, for example, information about the statistics, about the information on the people, like how many people are there in Poland, how there's a density of the people who is living in the cities, or employment, or something like that. But we started a notion that open source is very important. We do use open source in our project, and we want to share with the community. And this is a very important thing. So then we trying to go a little bit further with the technical task. So we created an API for our services. This is a REST API, which is, of course, has to be versioned and in the JSON format, which is the standard right now in the community. We try to decouple front-end and back-end and release on more frequent continuous delivery style. So the most important part would be the joint operation. I told you about the joint operation for the 13 ministries in Poland, and we are willing to go for another project in made in exactly the same manner. So we go for another large-scale project that tends to collaborate within a very different kind of ministries. So, for example, the guys from the Ministry of Finances are working together with the guys from the Ministry of Interior, from the guys from Ministry of Transportation, Infrastructure, and so on. And they're creating and collaborating with creating e-services for the Polish people in order to gain more information and more easy of use for them. So we have, of course, had the problems, and this wasn't that wouldn't be a case study if I won't go for those problems we have. So we had the problems with Scrum rejection and coming back. So during it was on the March 1st. When we have a big release to the public and so on. So just before that timeline, we had some problems with people that told us, we cannot do Scrum right now, it's too, we have too much load on our, just before the release, and they rejected the Scrum. Rejected the practices that tends to defend themselves, defend themselves for the problems that was because the government was pushing us and pushing more and more features. Just the release deadline was coming back, and the government was trying to push and push more features. And we said stop in one point, and when we moved those features for the next releases, however, people was very afraid of losing the control over product backlog and so on. And it happened. So few weeks before the final release, everything was chaotic, everything was disordered and so on. But they're trying to come back. There was a comeback to those changes. However, that was my fault. The slow changes before initial production release. I was pushing too weak for those changes with the Scrum practices, with the Kanban practices, and that was the result when the Scrum, why the Scrum was rejected in the first place. The people were not convinced that the Scrum is the best approach that will defend them for the problems that we'll encounter during the initial release. When the pressure was building up just before the release, they thought that the Scrum is an overhead with the development process. If they were better experience in the practices, in the whole system, in the process, they will see that Scrum is making it more organized, making it more less chaotic, and it defends between those kind of things. So we need more quality awareness. I showed you a picture on quality, but we need more quality awareness. Right now, technical debt is around, I suppose, 600 days for man days for a very large project and so on. But we need even more and more people who is trying to defend the code, trying to put more pressure, more focus on quality of our job. So the next problem was procurement process. You want Jira? Great. You have to create a procurement process, and you have to go and wait, for example, for 3 or 4 months in order to get a Jira. So you have to find yourself how to manage those things. And we had the problems with retrospectives. We've gone with the transparent retrospectives. So every team was like trying to collaborate with the other teams about their problems, but it fails just because the managers took in and tried to force and push the information on themselves. So what we have to do, we have to take another part on the retrospective. Do it right this time and do it in less transparent way. We have to work on this one, and we have to create a team constitution. That was a great oblivion when I was working in a previous company. After a retrospective, we produce those kind of documents with the lesson learned and so on. So after a while, like after a year or so, we have a pretty large set of lesson learned. And then we tried to categorize those information. And then we started to see the trend of those kind of information, and then we create our team constitution. And that was a very nice thing, because whenever other people would like to for example, interact with our team, they have a strict rules, they have a rules how we work, how our team is working. And when I was having this document, it's not document, just it follows few simple rules how to interact with your people, how to interact with your team. And this gives you an ability to, to have a API for people. Yeah, something like that. So the next thing would be creating a feedback culture. So another step, another try for going to the transparent retrospective, but this time make it right. This time make it done right, and go for learning organization, which is very hard thing to do because your whole organization has to learn on their problems. Go for autonomous teams, agenda on each meeting, definition of done on the organization level. That's very, very high level stuff. Here's some technical stuff I won't go into. Minimum viable product, in my opinion, that's one of the best things. Just release, see how the people are interacting with your system, and then build your system on how this thing is going. Okay, go for some other tools, techniques, and so on. I won't go into how I see the future. So, for the first thing is system for nationwide registers is one of our biggest things out there. The next one is Polish DMV, so Department of Mechanical Vehicles and Motor Vehicles, and then we want to go for joint operations, and we want to incorporate those lean startup ideas, which is, by the way, have you read the book from Eric Rice? It's called Lean Startup. It's a very good book on how to create minimum viable product and then build your product based on those things. So I will leave you with one last slide, and I will take some questions if you have. Okay? Just a minute, and the one last slide is this one. Yep. Okay. So this is a to-do, in progress, and done, people interaction, processes and tools, organization. And I'm open to question if there are.
So are there any questions from the audience?
Yep.
Yes, there.
Thank you for an interesting presentation. It definitely looks like more commercial organization, the way you were running things, because I would say you had freedom of choice to run, the projects that you like to run in that way. Did the fact that you are a governmental organization pose any constraints, and what were the major blockers from the governmental side for implementing this way of working?
So the question is about the middle manager. Am I thinking correct?
It's more about constraints imposed from the governmental side.
Oh, okay. So the question was how the government imposed the constraints on your project. Okay. So yes, we had a problem because the business, the faraway business, because we tried to. There's two things you can see. You have a product owner at your disposal for your team, and you can take a customer and bring him to the process. So we have two different approaches. The first approach was to create a product owner, the business analytics, who has a domain knowledge, and who created the backlog, and we try to incorporate the customers, so the final customer, the final business of Ministry of Internal, and we try to get those business guys to see the product, how it looks like every 2 weeks. And we try to incorporate them very deeply into the product backlog prioritization. So yes, we had problems with that. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want the responsibility, of course. We had problems. But as soon as they realized how big impact they have on the prioritization of the issues and how it's influence on the outcome on the system, they tend to realize that this is very powerful tools, and they try to start to engage with the system. That was the first part. The second part was the project on the very high level was using the Prince methodology, and then we started to create a development using the Scrum practices, using the Agile principles. I suppose I should say using the Scrum principles, because this is more important than using a Scrum, Kanban, or whatever. You have to focus on the spirit of Scrum, of the spirit of Agile. And then we had a problem, because people who was responsible for Prince management and so on didn't want to take those Agile goodies, and they were very afraid. But after a while, after the Agile proved itself to be working tool, it just a little bit consumes, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and after a while, it was completely normal, it was completely natural that the Prince was only, you know, the cover, and the whole process was developed using the Agile principles.